Good evening. We're going to get started. Welcome to all. Sorry about the music. Tonight's workshop, Resident-Owned Communities, is the third in our forum focused on meeting the housing needs of people living within Franklin County. This workshop forum or series is presented by Franklin County Continuing the Political Revolution and Greening Greenfield, and came out of our deep concern that there are way too many people in our area who cannot find quality, affordable housing. Situation continues to grow worse as the gap between the rich and the poor grows larger and the supply of housing does not keep up with demand. There was a story in the Recorder a week or two ago sort of documenting that the housing prices are continuing to go up as the supply of available housing shrinks. While this is certainly not new information to us, knowing that housing is scarce and expensive has not led to solutions which continue to worsen. Our intention with this workshop series is to bring people together, highlight various issues and aspects of the problem, and organize for action. The key to this is, again, we want to come out of this workshop series connected, working with the allies to actually get something done. Tonight's workshop is focused on resident-owned communities, excuse me. People who live in these communities live in manufactured houses. Some of us have very outmoded images of what used to be called mobile homes or trailers, but they've come a long way over the years. There are various estimates in terms of how many people live in manufactured homes in the US, but it's in the millions. There are dozens of rock communities in Massachusetts, hundreds or perhaps thousands across the country. Esther Sullivan, who's a sociologist at the University of Colorado, Denver, said that mobile home parks, as she called them, now compose one of the largest sources of non-subsidized low-income housing in the country. She says, quote, "At a time when we've cut federal support for affordable housing, manufactured housing has risen to fill the gap." At the same time, we know that private investors have also turned to manufactured housing as a growing market, a source for profit. Unscrupulous private mobile home park owners have ripped off residents, many of whom have no alternative but to suffer abuse at the hands of these landlords and owners who are making great profits at their expense. Resident-owned communities in many ways are a response to the abuse of private owners of mobile home parks, and tonight we're going to learn about them. We were talking a little bit before we opened the doors and noticed how much misinformation there is about manufactured homes and housing and how little information there is about resident-owned communities. We hope to, if not correct, at least put a dent in our collective knowledge about what they are and how they work. We'll be looking at questions such as how do they work, how are they organized, what are the benefits, and what to watch out for when joining one. We'll learn about the economics of what it takes for residents to purchase the park in which they live and how they organize to meet their needs. We will also respond to your questions. We have a wonderful three-person panel to help us learn about rocks, and I can't imagine a better, more informed panel to help guide us through the topic. Sandy Overlock, Colleen Preston, and Paul Bradley are here. We'll hear from the panel, and you'll be muted while that goes on, and then we'll open up the conversation to anyone who has questions tonight. So you'll be on mute while the panel is speaking. If you would like to ask a question, please write the word STACK in the chat, and I will call on you after the panel is finished in the order that you appear in the chat. We have 90 minutes for the workshop, so we have plenty of time for good conversation. So the first person up from our panel to speak is Sandy Overlock. Sandy is past president of the Wheel Estates Tenants Association. She helped form a tenants association for the community she was living in her manufactured home park, and was voted president. We got the owner, she says, to put a pump station in to bring our water up the side of a hill to the community. We also got street lights through the whole community, among other things, to aid residents. After that, she became president of the Manufactured Home Federation for the entire state of Massachusetts. She was elected president in 2017 after being secretary for 5 years. She helped reform the MFM, and bring back membership and board members. I was instrumental in getting legislation written for an alternative dispute resolution program, waiting approval by legislature. I worked with Attorney General, the I is Sandy, worked with Attorney General Martha Coakley to form the Attorney General's Unit for Manufactured Housing in the Consumer Protection Division. And I can't think of a more knowledgeable person to start a conversation off with as Sandy Overlock. So please welcome her and start learning.
Hi, everyone. As Doug said, I'm Sandy Overlock. I'm president of the Manufactured Home Federation of Massachusetts. I also sit as chair of the Manufactured Home Commission of Massachusetts, and I'm vice president of the National Manufactured Homeowners Association. Living in a manufactured home is different than a stick-built home or an apartment. Manufactured homes are built in a factory to HUD regulations. There are certain guidelines that must be followed according to HUD to install your home on your rented lot in a HUD regulated state. You can find HUD regulations on their website. If your home is already on the lot, you should get a home inspection, and there should be occupancy certificates issued by the Board of Health before you move in. Whoever owns the home gets these occupancy certificates, and the fire department has to inspect the smoke detectors and the carbon dioxide detectors. That's the person's responsibility who owns the home. Manufactured homes are not registered in the Registry of Deeds as we don't own the land. You'll need a bill of sale with the model of the home or serial numbers. There's no way yet in Massachusetts to register manufactured homes. They treat it like a car. There are laws to protect manufactured home residents living on rented land. In the 1980s, the legislature in Massachusetts had the foresight to write laws to protect residents. They are Chapter 140, 32A through 32S, and CMR 940-10. When you own your home, it's yours, and your owner of the property should respect that. The Attorney General's office created a guide for homeowners. In this guide, the beginning are explanations of the laws in lay terms to make it easier for the residents to understand. There are model rules the owners are to follow and get approved by the AG before they enforce them. In both chapters 140 and CMR 940 are in the back of the book. Each community also has park rules that, again, must be approved by the Attorney General and the Department of Housing and Community Development. You can obtain these laws by calling the Attorney General's Manufactured Housing Unit or asking them to send you a copy, or you can get them online. It's called the Guide to Manufactured Housing Community Law. The Manufactured Home Federation of Massachusetts is a volunteer organization that helps residents form tenants associations. We guide you on how to help have elections and form a board, answer questions, running meetings, and the use of Robert's Rules of Order. The MFM can help with issues with your owner of the community. You'll need to have an association of 51% and be incorporated to be able to purchase your community. ROC can help you with the incorporation or the MFM. We also answer questions about the statutes and guide you in a direction where you can find help. We monitor legislation in the State House that has to do with manufactured housing. Manufactured housing is a unique type of housing. There are different consumer protections than a stick-built home. The Attorney General's office has a manufactured housing unit in the Consumer Protection Division just for manufactured housing. This office helps with questions and what the laws are. Recently, they developed an eviction team in the Consumer Protection Division just for manufactured housing to help residents during the pandemic, as you're only being evicted from the land, not your home. In some cities and towns, residents have solicited their selectmen or council to get a home rule petition for rent control. This means the owner of the community must submit their financials to the Rent Control Board for review to get a fair net operating income to devise rent controls each month. This helps to try to keep the rents at affordable level in a corporate-owned community. The Manufactured Home Commission is a commission appointed by the governor. This commission meets 4 times a year around the state so the residents can come and express their concerns. The commission guides them in directions to go for help. It's also a volunteer position, and the commission reports to the governor's office. The National Manufactured Home Association is a national organization helping people throughout the country. NAMOA monitors legislation in Washington. They help residents form state associations like the MFM, Manufactured Home Federation, that can help protect all manufactured home communities in the state. This is a national organization and has helped states get laws passed for right of first refusal to purchase their communities, to stop the foreclosure of communities, and other laws to protect residents in manufactured home communities. We're also volunteers. It's a lot different living in a manufactured home community, and you should have as much information before you buy a home in a community. The communities must abide by the local codes such as the boards of health, the building departments, and zoning regulations. The owners of these communities can be anyone from a large corporation, a mom and pop, or a resident-owned community. They all must abide by the laws in Massachusetts. There are a lot of large corporations coming into Massachusetts and buying up the communities just for profit. These large corporations don't care about the residents, only how much money that they can make, and do very little to the community for repairs. Several of these large corporations buying in Massachusetts are immediately increasing some of the rents as much as $100 a month. Manufactured housing hasn't decreased in value over the years as some might think. It's still more affordable than a stick-built home, and you can have your privacy in a yard. A lot of the communities are elderly, not wanting to go into elderly housing, retired, and just don't want to share walls with people and not have a yard. It's an ideal situation for some retirees and young families that are not able to afford stick-built homes or wanting the upkeep to repair homes. These communities are close-knit and watch out for each other. It's a very safe place for children and most anyone looking for a community feel. I've lived in my community for 46 years. I've seen the kids that my son grew up with moving back into our community to raise their children because it's a safe and caring community.
And I'm sure we'll be coming back to you.
Great, Doug. Oops, you went on mute, Doug.
Doug,
Doug, you're still on mute.
Somehow you slipped into mute.
All right, let's try that again. Computer said I was unmuted, but clearly not. So next up is going to be Paul Bradley, and let me pull his information up. Paul is the founding president of Rock USA, LLC, a nonprofit social venture that makes resident ownership of manufactured home communities viable and successful nationwide. Rock USA operates through a network of 12 nonprofit technical assistance providers and a subsidiary of CDFI Rock USA Capital. These network affiliates have helped co-ops preserve 18,000 affordable homes in 266 communities in 18 states. There'll be a test at the end of this, so take notes. Rock USA Capital has delivered more than $250 million in financing since 2009. There's much more I could say about Paul, but I think I want to just give him the mic and Paul, take it away.
Very good, Doug. Thank you very much. And thank you for hosting the event and for inviting Colleen and me to the webinar tonight. Sandy did a wonderful job of really speaking from a consumer perspective what buying a home in a manufactured home community means and the considerations that a home buyer needs to take when they're buying a home in a community. And the Federation in Massachusetts has a long history of working for consumer protections for this group of homeowners in Massachusetts. And Sandy's leadership has really been pivotal to that. So I do hope folks will consider, how security in these communities can be achieved and things consumers can do in partnership with the Federation to bring about more security for home ownership in manufactured home communities across the state. What Colleen and I represent really is one way of bringing economic security to this sector. Fundamentally, this is a housing stock that is built up around homeowners owning their homes, but renting the land beneath their homes from a commercial owner. And keep in mind, there are many commercial owners, local and regional operators that have been providing affordable housing and really secure affordable housing in manufactured home communities or also mobile home parks in your county and across the state, and in fact, across the country. The challenge and the anxiety that homeowners live with is when the community is going to be sold and just what that new buyer might have in store or have planned for that community. And that can include the closure of the community for a change of use to another use, be that a commercial development or a residential development where the homeowners are displaced, be that substantial rent increases or lot rent increases, because again, you're renting the land. So the cost of the land or lot can rise dramatically. If the new buyer paid an extraordinary amount for the property, they're going to try to recoup that through higher rents. And then the third vulnerability that homeowners face, and Sandy faces, and frankly sees this time and again, is when the infrastructure just isn't attended to, and water or sewer or trees, believe it or not, is a huge issue, are just, disinvested in, and homeowners are put at risk as a result of that disinvestment. So those are the three basic risks of owning a home on rented land in this sector. Community closure and displacement, excessive rent increases, and neglect of physical infrastructure leading to health and safety issues. So what we in New Hampshire, and I started working with homeowners in manufactured home communities or mobile home parks back in 1988. Personally, what we've been doing in New Hampshire since 1984 through the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund is helping homeowners form a corporation or a cooperative to buy the land as a community group. And for that community group, therefore, to gain, essentially align the ownership between the homes and the land through cooperative ownership of the land while maintaining individual ownership of the home. And what we experienced, over a 24-year period was a lot of homeowner interest in that basic model, that ownership. So by 2008, there were 88 resident-owned communities in New Hampshire, about 5,000 homeowners in those communities. And it was about 20% of all of the communities in New Hampshire were resident-owned. That's now well over 30% cooperative ownership. But at the time, 2008, about 20%. Now, there were smatterings of resident-owned communities around the country. Ironically, one of those is in Berniston, Massachusetts, in your very fine county. In fact, my aunt, Arlene Young, some of you might know her. She ran a diner with her, previous husband in Turner's Falls, Massachusetts. Some of you might have eaten my aunt's wonderful fruit pies back in the day. But regardless, Aunt Arlene retired and moved into a co-op in Berniston, Massachusetts. And ironically, it was the very community that Chuck Collins, some of you might know Chuck from the Institute for Politics or the Cooperative Development Institute, but in his most recent book, Born on Third Base, Chuck tells the story of organizing a co-op, a manufactured home community co-op in Berniston, Massachusetts. And that really, for him, was a real pivotal moment in his career, recognizing just how investment in local communities and community ownership is really where we ought to be focused in terms of building resilient communities. So I invite people to read Chuck's book, Born on Third Base, and it tells a story quickly of the Berniston Co-op, which again, I just love because my aunt lived there, and I visited her and her second husband, Rod, there several times, and it's a wonderful community. In any event, there were a smattering of, I digress. There were smatterings of resident-owned communities in various states through this period, really in the 90s and 2000s, but no one had taken the initiative to create really a network of these communities. And so coming out of New Hampshire, I had this experience working with the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, and I was provided the opportunity to think about how would we make resident ownership possible across the country. And so in 06 and 07, through the Kennedy School at Harvard University, I did some work and really built out a social venture or business plan to scale resident ownership. And it really is based on the work we had done in New Hampshire successfully over many years in complete and deep partnership with local communities. We set about scaling this across the country. And we did so with a twofold strategy, or twofold structure, I guess. One was to partner with local organizations, people with real deep roots, real understandings of local markets that could work in communities in partnership with homeowners to form and help co-ops acquire their communities. That is now a network of nonprofits called Rock USA Network, excuse me. And you're seeing, Colleen has put up on the screen our national map. Each of the yellow dots represents a co-op, and you see the logos of our partners in various states. I would call out in Northampton, Massachusetts, the Cooperative Development Institute, which is the organization Colleen works for in representing the Massachusetts part of their program. They also serve Maine, Vermont, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. Libby O'Flaherty is also on the call. You've seen her comments in the box. She's also a Massachusetts Cooperative Development Institute employee. So we're happy to partner with CDI as well as these other nonprofits in these states to help homeowners both form co-ops and acquire their communities, but also provide ongoing technical assistance. And with that, I'll just say, just nationally, just a quick national note, Rock USA is currently working with 12 affiliates in 18 states. Doug, even in the last couple of weeks, we've added 3 additional communities. So we have 270 resident-owned communities now in 18 states, representing just over 18,000 member owners. And it's, continuing to expand from there. The other side of the house, if you will, is our financing of these communities. Resident ownership is made possible by a combination of an opportunity to purchase, but expert assistance through the process, and access to the capital necessary to help low-income people act like deep-pocketed investors to, in fact, purchase their communities. And that's the work of our Community Development Financial Institution, or CDFI, Rock USA Capital. So that's the national picture real quickly, and I couldn't help but pull out my Berniston connection. But with that, I'm really happy to introduce Colleen Preston, who comes to Cooperative Development Institute, A, as a homeowner, B, as a co-op member in Cranberry Village Resident Association in Carver, Massachusetts. Colleen also, before becoming an employee of Cooperative Development Institute, was one of the co-op leaders that was elected to the Rock USA board, representing cooperatives and members on the national board. In fact, served as my boss for some time, and then was so good. And really, her background and her experience and her dedication, Cooperative Development Institute hired Colleen, and she is now a technical assistance provider. So you could not ask for somebody with a more 360 point of view and set of experiences to reflect on this sector. And I hope folks have lots of questions for her, because she will handle them handily. So with that, Colleen, I'm happy to hand it over to you and let people know what's going on in Massachusetts.
Thank you, Paul. And I got to say up front here that I just love it when Paul calls me his boss. It makes my day. It's really not true, but it was fun. Thank you, Paul, very much. That was a good introduction. I'm the CDI's state manager for Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut. And I'd like to talk a little bit about how we work and what actually happens when a community comes on the market, and what people can expect. CDI, just briefly, a history of CDI. We've been around since 2009, but primarily focusing on other sectors. We're split into 3 primary organizations within CDI: the Business Ownership Solutions, which does a lot of converting small businesses to owner-owned and operated. They work with the owners of a small business. They work with the outlying community, with the employees of the organization. The Cooperative Food Services, they're working with farming and fishing and anything related to food production, creating cooperatives all over New England. So it's a very, very active sector right now. Cooperatives are big right now, and we're in the thick of it. And these guys are doing a fabulous job throughout New England. We do serve 5 states, Massachusetts, in New England, 5 states: Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Vermont, and Maine, and a little slice of eastern New York. Our part of CDI is the New England Resident-Owned Communities, known affectionately as NEROC, which is hard to say and hard to remember, but NEROC, you'll hear that a lot here. And this is where we are basically located. This is not a very detailed map, but it gives you a good idea of not only where we are, but where we still where we can go, what our options are in the rest of New England. You'll see not much there in New Hampshire, because as Paul explained earlier, the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund has been doing manufactured housing conversions for 30 plus years. So they are continuing that. They have, I don't remember what you said, 130, 40 of them now, Paul, something like that. And so this is where we are. And you can see quite a few in Massachusetts. All over New England, we have about 50. We're getting towards 5,000 homes, 5,000 units that have already been converted. That's a lot of houses and a lot of people. This is just since 2009, when we first partnered with Rock USA, just as they began going national. So this has been quite an endeavor for us. It's been 11, but it's been quite a few years now, 12 years now that we've been doing this. So seems like yesterday. And next we have our core services. This is what happens. This is going too fast. Hang on a second. Let me stop it. I'll go backwards here for a minute. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Okay. I think I may be back on track or close to it. So these are our core services. When a community goes on the market, Massachusetts is fortunate. They have an option to purchase law. And when an owner of a community decides to sell, they have to notify the residents so that they do have an opportunity to put in, hold on, so that they do have an opportunity to put in an offer, a matching offer to whatever the resident, the owner has. I'm sorry, I'm getting lost here because I lost my video. Okay, here we go. So when the community goes on the market, the owner has to notify everybody in mail, by certified mail, that that's what's happening, and they have 45 days from the date of that notice to do a whole bunch of stuff to respond to this. They have to form an association, they have to incorporate, they have to gather up 51% of their owners, their residents, and they have to come up with a purchase and sales agreement. If the owner has gotten an offer, they have to match that offer. If he's just planning to sell, the residents can make an offer. For the most part, what happens and what we usually run into is that the owner will get an offer, an outside offer from a third party, and notify the residents. Then the residents have to match that price. And that's generally what happens in almost everything we see now. There are very, very few. I think we have one in our memory in Massachusetts that the residents were notified because the owner was just closing up the community and selling the land. But that's very unusual. That hasn't happened often. So normally it's just an owner selling to a third-party investor, and this is the one chance that the residents have to purchase. And this is protected by state law. It was a wonderful law to pass. We were helped a great deal with that effort. With maybe some of you know State Senator Mark Pacheco. He was instrumental in getting that law passed, and it has been just an enormous help to the residents of Massachusetts. It's without that, everything would be so much more difficult. So once this is done, and we have a purchase and sales agreement, 45 days after the initial offer, and that's tough. It's tough to get the residents together. It's tough to get 51% of them agreeing. It's tough to get the purchase and sales agreement done all in 45 days. It's quite a sprint to the finish. After that, then the community has 90 days after that 45-day point to secure financing. And this is where Rock USA comes in, CDI comes in. We all scramble to get financing to finance not only 100% of the price, the purchase price, but up to an additional 10% to take care of any infrastructure upgrades that are needed. And very often there is a lot of work that needs to be done. Some of these communities are quite old. They have failing septic systems. Their water systems may not be good. Electrical systems. There's a great deal of infrastructure, and a lot of that has to be taken care of, because there's no point in buying a community, an older community that may be 35 or 40 years old, and just turn over a mess to the residents to take care of, because it's just that isn't our business model. That doesn't make sense. And that's why we do that. So once they have purchased, they've purchased with a solid capital improvement plan in place, 10-year capital improvement plan, and the money to put it in motion, so that they get the new septic systems, they get the new water systems. And instead of this just being purchased by the residents and they're left to their own devices, they have all the financial resources they need to take care of that. In addition, once they purchase, they also have the services of CDI for the life of their loan. And the loans are generally structured a 10-year balloon payment amortized for 30 years. So for that 10 years, we are with them every step of the way. We do, where it's kind of hard to even explain what we do. We're kind of jacks of all trades. We go to board meetings, we answer questions, we help with the infrastructure, we help with everything along the way. Annual meetings, bylaws, all the governing documents, everything that a community needs to get up and running. They're never just left to their own devices. We stay with them. We do whatever we can to help them through the early years and through the first refinancing, which usually comes somewhere around 10 years later, sometimes earlier. But we're with them through the whole process. In the beginning, we finance or help them finance getting an engineer to come in and do a property assessment to see what needs to be done in the way of infrastructure upgrades. Excuse me. And if for some reason at that point, after that property conditions report is done, if for some reason the deal falls through at that point, that is a forgivable loan. And it just, we go that far with a community and make sure that they're able to do this. They don't have to put up upfront money. In fact, just coming into the community, for the most part, in most communities, the price of admission is just a $100 membership fee that is paid upfront and one-time payment, and that provides membership. There's never any investment on the part of the residents. They don't have to put up their houses for mortgages. They don't have to take out loans. It's basically usually $100. There are exceptions. Sometimes it's a little bit more than that, but it's never more than 1,000. It's a very affordable way of gaining ownership of the land that your house sits on. You own it as a group, and it's affordable to virtually everybody living there. Even if they can't afford the $100, we have a $5 a month payment plan. So we make it as affordable and easy to do as possible. We try to anticipate all the problems, which we can't, of course, anticipate everything, but we know how to handle just about everything. It's a very, 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 very effective way to do it. In Massachusetts, we have 26 communities now in all of New England, and we have roughly 50 now. But in Massachusetts, out of 234, that's about 11% of the communities in Massachusetts are now resident owned and were converted by CDI. There are others resident owned that are not converted by CDI. They're generally equity models where the residents put up $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 up front to get started. And that's not a model we've ever done anything with. And then we know that our clients aren't prepared to do that. So that's in Massachusetts, 3,251 units right now, roughly. And we've got 144 million using ROC and all of the other partners that ROC engages to finance these communities. So that's where we stand in Massachusetts since 2009. There are others in the pipeline now. Things are moving along pretty quickly, and we hope to do a lot more. As when I showed you the map of Massachusetts, you know, here's a list of the communities, which went by too fast, sorry. Why is it going? Sorry, everybody, just traveling along here. Okay, there's a list of communities in Massachusetts. For the most part, there's a lot of them clustered in southeastern Massachusetts. You see those in Carver, down in Plymouth and Kingston, Middleborough, then going up and towards Attleboro, Plainville. Our newest communities this year were 2 in Plainville, Sunset Acres and Brookside. And we are starting to move westward. Arbor and Heritage are in Westfield. And there's our shining star out in western Massachusetts, out in North Adams, which that Sandy has already spoken about, Wheel Estates. Wheel Estates is in such a lovely location. It's sitting on top of a mountain, just a beautiful place. But there are plenty of opportunities out in Western Mass. It's just, there's no reason we can't be moving out here. We just haven't done it yet. And we are gradually getting there with the Westfield communities. Actually, Wheel Estates was one of our earlier ones. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. The furthest north we've gone so far is up on the North Shore. We've got a couple up in Peabody, but as I say, most are centered around southeastern Massachusetts. We've got one that's in the process right now on Cape Cod. We're pretty excited about that one, hoping that one goes through during our next fiscal year. That one's very interesting because it has a lot of empty lots, so we'll be doing some infill there, putting in new homes. And that's that one. Okay, so for the reason for what are the advantages to being a resident-owned community as opposed to an investor-owned community? And before I start here, I just want to say that you know, investor-owned communities, there's nothing inherently bad about investors. It's just we're a different business model, you know, and that we're talking about a for-profit model as opposed to a not-for-profit model. So we're in completely different universe, but I don't want to leave the impression here that investors are bad people. They're not. They're just like the rest of us. They're looking at this from a capitalistic point of view. We're looking at it from a cooperative point of view, and that's all. So as a investor in an investor-owned community, rent increases are unpredictable. You just don't know when that's going to happen, and it depends also on the owner. Whether sometimes some of these owners are very large national corporations. They tend to raise rents more often. Local owners might be more, you know, be more familiar with the residents than the community, and they're part of the greater community themselves, and maybe their rents are less volatile than some of them. That's just not a rule of thumb. It's just a observation. In a cooperative, though, the members vote on the rent. They take care of all of their expenses, and any profit generally goes into a reserve account for future capital improvements. But the members decide, every year they have an annual meeting and they decide what the rent is going to be. They have to be realistic. If they're not, then their community isn't going to be a desirable community. It's up to them. They make those decisions all by themselves. We make, as CDI will make recommendations. We help them with the budget process and everything, but in the end, it's up to the voters. With an investor-owned community, any surplus just is a profit for the owner. Again, that's what a for-profit model is all about. And in a resident-owned community, the surplus goes to the cooperative. Generally, it's used for, especially in the early years, it's just put away for a rainy day, for any unexpected capital expenses, or else to replace something that has a useful life of 10 or 15 years and you're saving up for it. That's not the only thing you can do with surplus. If the reserve fund is particularly healthy, and some communities have divided the surplus up among the members and just sent out a check to everybody. We had a community that in there for a few years in a row, every December they would make it a rent-free December, and that's where their surplus went. So that's, again, this is something that goes to the annual meeting and the members decide on it. Surprisingly, in all the many annual meetings I've been to, very seldom will a community vote to have the money go back to them as individuals. They almost always either put it into a special project or they put it into reserves for future. And very seldom do they take a check instead. Rules. The rules for manufactured housing communities are regulated by the Attorney General's office. And but in an investor-owned community, a lot of complaints that we hear when we first go in is that the rules aren't enforced, nobody cares, everybody does what they want. In a cooperative, the rules are voted on by the residents, and everybody's treated equally, fairly. There's generally a rules enforcement committee or a property manager that helps with the enforcement. And again, it's all in the residents. It's what they decide to do. Maintenance may not be well maintained, and that's true, not always true, but it's very often true, which is why by the time they go up for sale, they can be in pretty rough shape. And there's been deferred maintenance over the years. And so when the residents purchase, they put all of that, the money that's allocated in the beginning, they put it into fixing things up, and they maintain everything. They keep saving money. They keep planning for the future. They plan for new roads. They plan for new septics. They make sure the septics are pumped out every year. Everything is handled in a much better way, or at least a more reliable way. I don't want to say that everything under the investor-owned column here happens in every community in every instance. That's not true. But in many cases, it is true. And in many cases, when these communities are sold, they are really not in good condition. And so that's something to keep in mind as you look at this. And anytime an investor owns a community, they're gonna sell it, close it, change it. They can do whatever they want with it. It's their property, of course. That can sell. That's the most common thing, is that it gets sold to another investor. That's far and away the most common thing. It can be closed entirely and the land sold. That's tough. That's tough on the residents. It's very hard to have your home be sitting on rented land and have the land be sold and to be told that you have to get your house out of there. That's not, for the most part, very easy to accomplish. And in many, many cases, it's impossible. Some of these homes are older. If you tried to move them, they would just fall apart. And just moving them is prohibitively expensive. And sometimes they'll want to just change the use of the land, build condos or something. So it just, it's a very precarious place to be in a home where you have no control over what happens to the land that your home is sitting on. You have no control at all. Now, in Massachusetts, if a community is going to be closed, the owner is required to give 2 years notice, which is to give people time to make other arrangements. And they're also supposed to pay fair market value for a home if someone decides they're just going to move and just leave their house there. That doesn't happen very often because the fair market value of some of these houses is just so low that it doesn't really help the homeowner. It doesn't help them go find another house, for example. It just isn't a viable option. So all of that is very scary. If you're living in a community like this and something like that happens, it just literally pulls the rug out from under you, and you have to figure out what to do. When you are in a cooperative, in a resident-owned community, it's off the market. Our business model, it can be sold, anything can be sold, but it has to be sold to another not-for-profit, and to keep the ownership viable as it is. So it becomes very safe at that point. Once a community becomes resident-owned, everything changes, and you just sort of take a big sigh of relief because you're safe. You have a relationship with the land beneath your feet, and it's so significant. It's hard to even tell you the magnitude of that one thing, that then you own the land, or the association owns the land. You're not going to lose it, and you're not going to lose your home. One sort of side effect of this is that the homes do generally go up in value faster than in other communities because of this stability that they now have attained through resident ownership. So that is that aspect of it may not be immediately apparent, but it's what the residents probably feel the most. Okay, and this is just going through how everything is governed. Each household has one vote. You have to be a member to buy into the community. There's a committee, a membership committee that processes applications, and everybody has to become a member, pay their $100. There's an elected board of directors, an election every year. The board of directors makes day-to-day decisions, just to keep things running. The day-to-day decisions are not major ones. They can't spend a whole bunch of money on something without membership approval. Most of the bylaws will have a clause in them that says the directors can't spend more than $2,000 or $3,000 above budget on something without going back to the members for approval. So the members are very aware of everything that's going on, and they vote on everything that's going on. They vote on the budget every year. The budget is what determines all the operating expenses and, of course, the rent to pay for it all. The community rules and regulations are also voted on by the members, as are the bylaws and the capital improvement plan. There really isn't much of anything that doesn't run through the membership for approval. Just very, very minor operational type things. The rules and regulations, they work with the Attorney General's office. There's a template that the Attorney General's office suggests, doesn't require, but they suggest it, and they keep pretty close watch on the rules to make sure that there's nothing that would be illegal or unfair. And also the bylaws, the bylaws, all of these, the rules, the budget, and the bylaws. Also, CDI looks at them to see if there's anything that might cause legal problems. It gets shown to Rock USA. They have had attorneys look at these documents, and they just want to make sure that you're not doing anything that would be in violation of any federal, state, or local laws. But for the most part, everything is in the hands of the residents. So I've already talked a lot about the benefits, the economic and social. The social benefits, maybe I haven't. Once you purchase the community, things change quite dramatically. People become friendlier because you're all working together for the same thing. You're all serving on committees or getting together for community functions. Everybody gets to know each other, everybody watching out for each other. And again, the stability. There's also, once a community has taken hold, it becomes an entity itself in the greater community. If you live in a small town in Massachusetts, and for example, one of our communities in Halifax has 430 homes in it. That's, in fact, I believe that's still the largest rock community in the country. It's certainly the largest in Massachusetts. And with 430 homes, they have become they're quite a political force in the small town of Halifax. And since they've become resident owned, that has become even more so. They're quite a significant voting bloc, and they've banded together. They're a community, and they have a little more heft than and influence than perhaps they used to. The gentleman in the suit there, that's Mark Pacheco I spoke about earlier, who was so influential in getting the option to purchase laws passed. And he is still very involved. You see him here with a group of new residents, new owners, and he's been a great friend to us. And finally, this is our "We Own It" sign. Everybody when they have a great big celebration when they pass papers, and everybody has their "We Own It" sign. And it's a big day. It's a very exciting day when you pass papers and you've just paid millions of dollars for something, and now you own it. It's pretty exciting. The woman there in the red, her name is Kathy, and I can never pronounce her last name. It begins with a Z, and we call her Kathy Z. She's one of our greatest ambassadors. She just is so committed to this whole movement, and she's been an enormous help to us. She travels to other communities when they're thinking about purchasing and she's just been very, very influential in spreading the word. So with that, I think that's it. And we will have Doug, have you been collecting questions or collecting, you got a stack there?
I do indeed. So thank you to the panel for getting us quite an overview of rocks. Could you, panel, just briefly describe or define what a manufactured home is? I mean, I know there's images people may have of trailers, of mobile homes and manufactured homes. What makes a home a manufactured home?
I will leave it to Paul, the real technicalities. I just want to say one thing is that that has been such a stigma to overcome. to overcome the trailer park stigma. We never use that term. It's just, it, it just defines people in a way that they shouldn't be defined. And that has been for a very long time. So we refer to them as manufactured home communities. That's the generally accepted term now. Mobile homes, even that is outdated. There hasn't been a mobile home built since I think around 1974. So now we're looking at manufactured homes, entirely different. I just to use myself as an example, I bought a new one in 2016, and I mean, you would never know. It's not a trailer. You would never know it wasn't a regular stick-built home. It's they're just very well constructed, very well insulated. Um, everything about it is it's a new home. So, Paul, do you know the technical specifications? The manufactured homes are HUD homes, mobile homes are not, and some
Yeah.
have they come in on wheels. I think that's the basic difference.
Yeah, I think just a couple of things. So manufactured homes are factory built, and there are other types of factory built homes in the country. Modular homes are the second largest segment of factory built homes, and often confused with manufactured or HUD code, as Colleen accurately describes these. And the third segment, of course, would be recreational vehicles, which are not intended for permanent occupancy. And then there's a whole set of factory built, panelized homes, kit homes, a whole range of what fits into the factory built segment, and differentiated, as Colleen indicated, from site built housing, that which built on site. So interestingly, Colleen used the term trailer, mobile home, and manufactured home in almost the same sentence, certainly the same paragraph. And that really is one of the historic challenges with this housing stock. Is the fact of the matter is it's all three. This started off as the travel trailer industry in the 1940s and 50s, and as travel trailer courts or parks in the 50s and 60s. But in the 1960s, in the late 60s specifically, travel trailers began growing larger and became permanently set, such that people were adding carports and porches. So these travel trailers were no longer weekend homes. They were in fact permanently set. They were growing large, and they were becoming homes for occupancy, permanent occupancy. And so Congress actually acted in 1974 and segmented the recreational or travel trailer business from the manufactured home business. And so if you buy a home constructed after June of 1976, it is built to the HUD code and is a manufactured home. If you buy a home that was built prior to 1976, it's technically a mobile home, and if it's long enough ago, it really would be a travel trailer. And there are still some very good 1960s homes in place that people would not sell or trade out for any new fangled home. And that's really, that's the history of the sector. So there are people and there are trailer courts today in parts of the country, but most of these communities now are HUD code manufactured home communities. That is the legally correct definition. And there's a very clear HUD code that defines this housing stock. And it's different from modular. It's different in one key aspect. Modular is always built in a factory and built to the local building code. HUD code is built to a national code, a preemptive federal code. So it can be built in Pennsylvania, pulled into Massachusetts, put in place, set permanently, and it is guided by the national HUD code. A modular home built in Pennsylvania, shipped to Massachusetts, is going to conform to the local building code. There are other distinctions, but we don't need to go further. That really is a principal one, but that's often where the confusion rests between modular and manufactured.
Thank you, Paul. Let's get to questions. Chad F., I think you're first on the list. You had a question in the chat, but maybe you could say it out loud so panel can hear it.
Sure, let me look it up. I mean, you know, I popped out when I saw the limited equity ownership, or that's not the right first word.
Limited equity cooperatives.
Well, not the co-op, because
Oh.
there are so many different kinds of limited equity ownerships. Let's see. Oh, I asked, is there any cross-pollination with this small home movement, tiny houses movement, or other forms of limited equity ownership, such as CLTs? And I mistakenly put in Section 8 because that's a rental. But I'm just trying to, you know, that photograph that showed We Own It, I think came out in Shelter Magazine before they went online only. And I had heard about Rock, and it reminded me of, you know, co-ops and different things like that. So I'm wondering if you have cross-pollination with other movements for, you know, affordable housing.
Yeah, you obviously have a lot of experience in the space, Chad. This may be not particularly interesting to a lot of people here, but suffice it to say, this is really in the shared equity housing segment of the affordable housing space. So what makes resident-owned communities as limited equity co-ops a part of the shared equity space is that homeowners in these co-ops can sell their homes at market value and get their equity out of their homes. And in fact, it's one of our objectives to see homes selling at a higher price, because you really want to help people build equity and build wealth in their homes. That's really good for us as a country. It's good for people's personal balance sheets. The land, however, is secured as a community asset. There's no profit motive. So if Sandy's community chooses to sell the underlying land, the members don't get a windfall profit from the sale of the land. They can sell their homes again on the open market, but the land is secured as a community asset. And were they to sell it, and no resident-owned community has ever sold, but were they to, any proceeds would be donated to a nonprofit doing affordable housing development. The idea is, let's preserve the community as an affordable community long-term, but let people have equity in their homes and sell their homes at market value so they can build wealth and have a secure asset. It's sort of a middle way, if you will, if you're fans of Gandhi, you know, find the middle way and, you know, preserve that community asset, but do so in a way that's really respectful of people's home ownership and, you know, needs to build family wealth.
Okay, next question. George T. had a couple of questions.
Thank you, Doug. I'll keep it to just one question for the sake of time. Just mentioned I'm on the Greenfield Planning Board, and I was interested in knowing across Massachusetts how many communities disallow this kind of housing or need to update their zoning bylaws or ordinances. I'll just mention that I was just reviewing the Greenfield zoning ordinance, and it lumps mobile homes, trailers, and campers, and specifies that none of them can be used as a permanent residence. And when we passed an accessory dwelling unit a few years ago in town, it specified that a detached accessory dwelling unit, a second residence on the property, could not be a mobile home. And I just checked also in our definitions as part of our ordinance, we do not reference manufactured homes. So I was just curious about getting a broader picture of that and any efforts being made to lobby for upgrading or updating of ordinances. Thank you.
Sandy, do you want to address that in Massachusetts?
I'm not too sure how many communities are totally disallowing manufactured home parks. There's not many. Right now, most of the communities are looking to find affordable housing, and they are granting permits for some existing communities to expand and make them larger. But I haven't really looked into the communities that are not allowing manufactured home parks at all.
Yeah. So, and in terms of ADUs, George, very interesting choice of terms. So by federal law, as of 1983, mobile home was redefined as manufactured housing. I mean, that's a matter of law. So in effect, what the zoning ordinances have accomplished is, I think, strictly speaking, and I'm not a lawyer, George, so don't come to the Paul Bradley law firm for a legal opinion on this, but to restrict homes as ADUs based on age, one might imagine, but nothing in what you said restricts manufactured housing, HUD code manufactured housing, as it's currently legally defined as an ADU, which I'm sure is not what the authors of that ordinance were intending. And it's unfortunate that they intended to do that, because quite frankly, this is a remarkably affordable housing stock that is environmentally very sound. Clayton Homes, which is the country's largest manufactured home builder, reports that the construction of a single section manufactured home produces 2 32-gallon barrels of trash per house construction. It is remarkable how efficient these factories are, and therefore the Urban Institute in 2019 had a report that manufactured homes are, between 35 and 47% lower cost per square foot than site-built housing. So there's tremendous cost effectiveness in building in a factory, and there's some environmental benefits of doing so. So it really, Colleen noted this earlier, a lot of what you see in regulation is rooted in a very old 30, 40, 50-year-old understanding and view of what factory built housing and what mobile homes or trailers are or represent. And it's a significant problem for the industry, but I think it's a significant problem for consumers, because people are paying more for a housing unit than is absolutely necessary. I would rather see those savings invested in good energy efficiency and improving the quality standards. Colleen has an example just recently, and Colleen, why don't you talk about the net zero home that was just installed?
Yeah, this has been very exciting for us. We just put in our first zero energy home in Carver, and this was built by Vermont Homes up in Vermont. This was a 2-bedroom, roughly 15 by 70 feet. It's completely solar operated. It is just beautiful. It was, I felt like buying it myself. It's so well made. The construction material was just so obviously superior to most construction material you see in stick-built homes. And it's a completely different home. It has a room for just mechanicals where all the gadgetry is. I won't presume to try to explain that. But while we were installing it, the company that manufactured it in Vermont, they monitored it. They could tell through the monitor what the temperature was and what was going on in the home as far as the environment was concerned. They had an air filtration system that was particularly appealing to people this year, because it filtered the air quite well, even picking up some viruses. And it would filter itself whenever it determined the need to do so. So it wasn't anything you had to do. It's something the house just did it all by itself. And we had at one point, the monitor was saying that the house was kind of stinky. There was something in there that smelled bad, and it was a chemical type smell. So this is before the house was sold, but we went in and looked, and somebody had left a piece of siding, vinyl inside, and vinyl has a gas that escapes from it. And the monitor was picking that up and not liking it. So that even to that degree, it was picking up things like that. It was a great home. We had every intention of doing some marketing with it. We're selling it, and we intended to have people come in. The pandemic kind of made that difficult, but we had all kinds of plans of getting around that. We were having a ribbon cutting ceremony, so we put it on the market, and it sold the first day, and all of our marketing plans went down the tube. So, but it's. I think this is going to be a very popular home. We're hoping to put another half dozen or so around in Massachusetts over the next year or two, and we're looking into the options there, but this one sold for 219. It was a 2-bedroom house. It was maybe something like 1,100 square feet, so it isn't huge, but 219, and we think that tweaking the model a little bit more and doing more, scaling it up a bit, we can go lower than that. So it's a very exciting home. It's a very exciting concept that something this state of the art is becoming affordable to people that live in these communities. It was a very exciting project.
Great. Okay, let's move to some other questions. We're going to run a little bit over time, and I hope folks can stay with us because we want to make sure that all the questions that have come in get responded to. Louise is next with your question.
Why don't we skip my question because it has to do with the private property owners, and I was just wondering about what obligations they have to maintain sewage and things like that, and it seems as though they don't have much. That property, the homeowners don't have a whole lot of leverage over the man who owns or the people who own the land. And I think maybe we can drop that and move on to what is the community-owned homes. I think that's more interesting to the group. Thank you.
Well, any of the panel want to give a really quick response
I just might
to
note,
that?
I just might note there, and Sandy might have a different view here.
Oops, I think Paul froze.
Paul froze, yep.
Well, the laws in Massachusetts, the corporate owners, well, any owner of the community, whether it be corporate or co-op, have to follow certain guidelines, and they are responsible for maintaining the sewer and the water and any anything on the property that's permanent. But they have to, that's up to the boards of health, the local boards of health, to enforce those. If they are not maintaining the sewer or the water or any sanitary conditions, the boards of health can enforce that. And if the boards of health don't, then the Attorney General's office can, because there are very strict laws in Massachusetts for that, for any park owner, whether it's co-op or a corporate owned.
Okay, thank you. Pam Goodwin, you're next.
Hi, thank you. Let me get my question out. I may have misunderstood, and this might have been just answered, but I believe when you said Martha Coakley, the former AGO, assisted. So you may have just answered that, but I guess the question is, when, is there a rent cap on the land? They could just keep raising and raising what the rent is for people that are in their manufactured home? Was that what the protection was gonna be on?
The protection was to give the residents an opportunity to purchase the community when it went on the market.
That one, Colleen, was the one I worked with Martha Coakley on, was the alternative dispute resolution
Oh,
program.
right, right.
It
That
was
was,
to, and it's still in the House. It's supposed to pass this year. That was to help residents who aren't in a resident-owned community, who are in corporate-owned communities, to be able to go before a dispute resolution board and the owner of the property to get their issues worked out without having to hire an attorney and spend thousands of dollars to make these owners. That's another thing with corporate owners. If they don't want to do it, the only way you can enforce the laws in Massachusetts is to take them to court and force them to do it with a judge ruling, and it costs thousands of dollars. With a co-op, you don't have that, because it's your residents and your board of directors that go through all of these things, and they do it because they want to have a nice community. But the resolution is to help those people in corporate owned, the large corporations that are coming into Massachusetts and they don't want to abide by the laws that are on the books. So that will help those people.
Thank you. My other thought was, there's a very lovely, I would call it a mobile home because I used to live in one, and I don't call it trailer trash or trailer anything, but I thought it was in Hatfield. It's right near Northampton. And so maybe somebody knows whether it's considered Hatfield or Northampton. It's a lovely area. Elderly folks live there that are friends of mine. But there's, I believe, some out in Holyoke. I think there's a lot out here in Western Mass that maybe, you're still working on, or they're unaware of the opportunity.
well, we have to wait until a community comes on the market. So if the owner has no interest in selling, then we just wait. So
Thank you.
we just, as they come along, we are usually involved. We usually at least go talk to people and find out if there's any interest.
Next question from Nina Whale. And if I mispronounce your name, my apologies. Nina, are you still with us? No, perhaps not. Sarah Brown is next then. Had a question in the chat.
Hey, this is Saul and Sarah here.
Hi.
Thanks so much for the presentation, and really exciting to see all this work happening. I had a couple related questions, so feel free to just answer whatever you want. But the first one, they're sort of around starting new resident-owned communities, both the zoning, financing, and I know that Rock USA helps communities democratize that are already existing, but are they also interested in helping new communities start? And if so, are they limited only to manufactured home communities, or would a variety of building units that all are, owner controlled, cooperatively controlled, is that something that they're interested in? So yeah, we're interested in, we're renters in the area and would love to have a little bit more ownership over where we live, but also, be involved in the community and take land off the speculative market. So that's our hope, and I'm excited by all the work that's going on here.
So who
I think
will
in
take this one?
Massachusetts, for the most part, we're just dealing with existing communities and only manufactured housing communities. Most communities, most towns in Massachusetts don't allow new communities, new manufactured housing communities to come in because of their zoning regulations. So we haven't gone into that sector yet. CDI as a whole, outside of the NEROC program, does some occasional work with cooperative housing, non-manufactured housing. but this program is non-manufactured, is manufactured housing only.
I can speak to that really quick because I'm here.
Yeah.
So we at CDI, this is Olivia Flaherty. I'm Colleen's colleague at Community Development Institute, and I also work with the NEROC program. We do have a kind of pilot investigatory group that we have formed kind of across our colleagues at CDI to investigate what it would look like to support different kinds of cooperative communities. And there's no real answer yet. I think the real power, one of the real powers of the ROC model is the access to funding that the model provides. And I think that's a place that certainly we don't have the answers for the financial piece. But, you know, we are looking at ways that we can offer, you know, governance guidance or, you know, help with the more structural formation of different kinds of cooperative living arrangements.
Okay, Will Flanders has a question.
Hi, thanks for this presentation. I've learned a tremendous amount. My question is, I'm on the planning board in the town of Shelburne, and we have what must be an ancient, you know, no mobile park bylaw that, you know, you have to jump through a ton of hoops, and we don't really want to, or at least whoever passed this law doesn't want mobile home parks or manufactured homes. And we're doing some interesting affordable housing initiatives here. And this has opened up my eyes to the possibility of changing our bylaw. And so my question to Paula and Colleen and Sandy is, are there any towns that have particularly good bylaws that we could use as models for redoing ours, so that we can both have more manufactured home communities, but also more cooperative development, you know, in this area?
I don't know of any. As I said, that for the most part, towns do not want so-called trailer parks in their town. And we, you know, educating people about manufactured housing it's a tough hill to climb. This may not be, it may be more out in the West, and Paul could address that if there's more going on out there, but I don't know of any place in Massachusetts that has particularly friendly practices towards manufactured housing, no.
Colleen, how about if they check Taunton? Senator Pacheco is the one that started all the regulations for protecting manufactured home communities. So maybe their bylaws might be something he could look at to get an example of.
Yeah, you could try that. But for the most part, we do run into a lot of roadblocks there.
Will, a couple of off the top of my mind ideas. One, I think one of the reasons you've seen such limitations on communities, new communities, is again this fixed idea based on the history of this housing stock. But boiled down, there's some real values to thinking about, you know, higher density, single family detached community development, which these communities represent, right? And one of the things homeowners really love about manufactured home communities, as my mother expressed as she was buying a home in a community, you drive in your driveway and within 2 steps, she's up her front steps and in the house. And she has 4 walls and a small yard. She's in a safe, small lot community in an efficient manufactured home. There's a lot of advantages to this land use approval, but you've got to come to terms with the land security issue right out of the gates. So one concept that has been practiced in some places, and I'd have to point you to those directly, is condominium manufactured home community developments. It is a role for the private sector to play in terms of developing, but it can be developed by the private sector, where the land in the home is transferred in one fell swoop, and we don't end up 5 and 10 years down the road with more people on homes on rented land, which is just a fundamental issue in this space. So that is one place to look, or one way to think about the high density. But I do encourage it, and I think there are significant advantages for the consumer in that, including conventional residential financing, which is something we haven't gotten into in this call. But one of the historic challenges in the community space as well is these homes are generally financed as chattel, personal property, and there just aren't good, efficient, low interest loan alternatives for homes in communities. And if you can resolve that as a part of the land use approval, i.e. a condominium development, then you're down the path of solving the two big issues: land security and access to decent financing. So those are my firm beliefs and feelings on the matter. There's not many places where that's being practiced, unfortunately, Will.
Thanks.
Okay, and the last question goes to Susan Wargafnik, who had a question about accessibility and mobile homes.
You talked a great deal about the fact that older people in particular are interested in living in manufactured homes. And one of the things we've been talking about a great deal is the whole question of accessibility, not just indoors to outdoors, but also bathrooms and other things. And I wonder if you could respond to that question.
Yeah, there's all kinds of options there. If you're buying a new home, it wouldn't be any different than a new home anywhere. But there are all kinds of options for accessibility. And if you're renovating an older home, that would be a different story. It would depend on the age of the home and everything. But I really think that it's a wonderful option for the elderly. And the communities, we have so many communities that are over 55 communities, and a lot of them have people that require accessibility, that require ramps and wider doorways, and that can all be taken care of. Yeah.
One new infill home in a community we worked in, now a co-op, was a fully handicap accessible home with rails, and allowed a bedridden individual to operate throughout the household on a rail system. That was really phenomenal. I'd not seen that. And it was a factory built HUD code home, probably the most affordable, fully ADU unit one could imagine in a co-op. So yeah, Colleen's right. New, existing, completely different. And, that's just not contemplated in these existing homes.
Thank you.
And we're going to have to wrap it up there. It's been 90 minutes and we've just sort of scratched the surface, and you can see questions popping up all over the place. So I want to say a couple of things. First of all, thank you all for being here tonight. We intend for this series of workshops on issues related to housing, including this one tonight, to be a conversation starter and an organizing tool in a sense. We intend to move on from here to joining with allies to take action. And so we're going to send, in a couple of days, we'll send just a general email out to all of you who either signed up and or attended to this workshop, sort of thanking you. There'll be a copy of the video that was made. I guess it's not video, whatever it is, whatever the technology is, you can watch it again. It'll also be posted on the Greenfield website. You can go to our website, housingishumanright.com. There's a discussion board to communicate with others. And we will be in touch in a week or two to organize a follow-up meeting to this one, where we can go into more detail and depth in terms of this particular issue and think together about how we might move forward. The next workshop in our series is next Wednesday, April 21st at 7 p.m. And that's a workshop on community housing trusts. And we'll be looking at the Burlington, Vermont experience. And there's clearly overlap between and among the various workshops offered during this session. And we hope that we will join forces with those who are attending the other workshops to again work together to make things better. Thanks to Gabby Perry for technical support. Thanks, of course, to our panel, Sandy Overlock, Colleen Preston, Paul Bradley. Thanks to Greening Greenfield and Franklin County Continuing a Political Revolution for sponsoring and supporting the workshop. And thanks to all of you who were here tonight and who are interested in working on housing. So hopefully we'll see you next Wednesday. Thanks and good night.